In the studio, TheInformer, Ryan Smith, a member for Warrandyte, talking to us. We had a chat a little earlier about a host of things that we're struggling to cope with. You talked about how business is struggling, you talked about how families are struggling. We talked about the level of anxiety, pardon me, and stress that now really is quite palpable, and you can feel it. Yeah. You can see it in social media. There's an anger. Can I also tell you that we've had small business leader after small business leader after small business leader reach out to us and say, small business, because of the very nature of small business, doesn't have a united voice, but they're screaming out there. Yeah. They are in pain. We have had businesses say to us, you know, we've struggled, we've lent on friends, we've done this, that and the other, we've coped with just about every emergency, but this is it. We're almost at the end of our tether. Do you get that feeling as well? There's
no question, you're exactly right. I mean, people were those people you described were at the end of their tether in the first wave. This has gone beyond that. There's a feeling of utter hopelessness now that they can't get back on track. And again, you know, myself, my colleagues from our constituencies have heard people who are talking about suicide, talking about the fact that they don't know what's next, so they can't go on. It's quite horrendous. And while we talk about, or the government talks about a package to increase mental health services, I think too many people are going to fall through the cracks, and I think the government needs to understand that that's the case. And the reality is, as a paper recently issued by the University of Sydney said, the best defence against psychological problems is work and training and education. So that's where our focus should be. Our focus, while some people say, you're more worried about the economy than you are about people, it's tied.
It goes hand in hand.
It completely goes hand in hand. And that sense of worth, the sense of knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, is what helps you maintain peace of mind. And that's what we need to be talking about. We talk about recovery. When I talk about recovery, I'm not just talking about economic recovery. I'm talking about people's mental health, the recovery of that, of dealing with depression.
That's a good point, because so often when we drive, we go for a drive, we have to look forward, we have to look towards the horizon. And if you're a really good driver, you navigate your way by watching the traffic ahead. We're not being given that opportunity in any way, shape or form. We've been told to hunker down, to bunker down, and to do as we're told. And you know, in a democracy, in a society that has been very used to, for the better part of 70 years, doing what it feels like doing. I have a friend of mine, in fact, one of our members of the TheInformer team. Last year, for example, I would get a phone call from him, and where are you? I'm in Canberra. Where are you? I'm in Adelaide. I'm seeing the family. Where are you? I'm in Brisbane. I'd say to him, George, where are you going to be tomorrow? He says, wherever my business takes me. Now, suddenly, not only George, but thousands of others are being told, mate, all those things that you've come to believe are normal, fair, and keep you fired up, happy, emotionally stable, are all going to be wiped away from you. And you're going to do what you're told. I can't imagine how someone can stay healthy for long enough to survive what we've been going through. This is months now.
Yeah, people need to be with people, and the Premier will say that people are trying to find loopholes. People are trying to keep sane. Do you know, in New Zealand they introduced a system, a buddy system, where people living alone could nominate a buddy, and they had to both nominate each other.
My wife still hasn't recovered from the statement of the Premier, Daniel Andrews, telling you about who you can and can't have in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, quite seriously, just pursue that thought again. Jacinda Ardern we're constantly being told is the ideal, is the model, is the Prime Minister we all want. Okay? The trouble is, she's New Zealand. So if that's all well and good for her, why aren't we adopting similar practices?
Well, I think that's right, and I think that particularly for those, I mean, I've got colleagues who live alone, and I think that, you know, at least I've got my family, and that's, you know...
Which, don't say at least, that's a huge
Well, it is,
plus.
that's right. But those who live alone, I think a buddy system, you know, if you both nominate the same one, if you don't see anyone else, that would be a worthwhile proposition. And indeed, you know, I spoke about my own children. It's been shown that there's a much lower incidence of risk amongst teenagers. Teenage depression is spiking. Maybe they should be able to nominate someone too. If we knew this was going to finish in a few weeks, maybe I'd let it all go. But we don't know what the end is. You know, we've got some more encouraging numbers, but you know, the Premier said just yesterday that if we don't have more testing, we ain't coming out of lockdown. If we're not coming out of lockdown, then you've got to start thinking of ways to deal with people's mental health.
Speaking of mental health, we hear from experts that Victoria has a unique way of doing what it does, very centralised. And our system here is basically wrapped around Melbourne, the Greater Melbourne.
Yeah.
And yet we have this vast state, and you have centres, regional centres like Shepparton, like Geelong, like Colac, where there are massive challenges being faced by the community and by the residents. Anxiety, again, through the roof. What do we say to them if we have this really centralised system? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? If the opposition was to step in, would you be looking at to change systems like this?
Well, you have to.
Looking to break them down, and we talk about decentralisation. We saw the plans to make Geelong a more substantial city. Would the opposition look at making this a more consistent policy throughout the state about more than just mental health?
I think you have to. I think you have to look at things. This is why I'm a big promoter of a Royal Commission. It's not just for the theatre of it all, but it's actually to find out what fundamentally went wrong. What is fundamentally wrong with the way that our bureaucracy works? What works in other areas? Why is it that other states have done so much better than us? You need to have a comprehensive look at the way things have done and then fix the problems. And the centralisation is a major point, as you rightly say. You know, the residents in Colac who experienced that outbreak as a result of the local abattoir, they couldn't get DHHS people out there. The businesses started testing themselves because the department was just unable to respond quickly enough.
And not only was it not able to respond in a manner that it needed to respond, but we've seen fractions, not fractions, what's the word I want? We've seen a breakdown in communication on so many different levels.
Yeah.
Are there genuine problems at bureaucracy? I said to someone only the other day, Jenny Mikakos, Health Minister, all right? Now, no one has ever said for one moment that she wasn't working hard. The question has always been about competence.
Absolutely.
Yeah? So, at the end of the day, is the department assisting her? If something is broken, aren't you, as the Minister, required to fix it?
Well, the parliamentary hearings, anyone listening to them, you could not possibly take any other conclusion that the ministers didn't know what the bureaucracy was doing. Wow. And the bureaucracy didn't know what ministers they were reporting to. That's at a base level. Fix that, you've got some room for improvement, but until you recognise that's a problem, we're stuck with what we've got.
Ryan Smith, there's so much more we need to talk about. There's so much more that we're going to have to endure over the next couple of months. Will you promise to come back to The Informer and we'll talk again?
I would love to, thank you.
The member for Warrandyte, Ryan Smith.